They often paint a picture that's a bit more black and white, where this person is clearly the villain and this woman is clearly the victim. And you could see, like, how could she possibly experience that at this person's hand? Or when she does experience it, she's out right away and has a revelation. You don't normally see how gray it can be and how confusing it can be, and how you can be a woman with confidence and agency and know better and still not see all of.
Why did Blake and Ryan hijack a film? And why are they making these allegations against Justin Baldoni and Wayfair? Especially when there are so many pieces of evidence that dispute and exonerate Baldoni and Wayfair from any wrongdoing. We introduced the idea yesterday that Blake Lively was eager to recover and reshape her image after a box office failure. She essentially took over the previous film that flopped, which was Rhythm Section. That's a whole story for another time, and I promise we'll cover it. We also discussed how Ryan saw himself as the caring husband and a marketing genius who could fix the script, despite not having read the book. Their narcissism, ego, greed, and desire for a sequel to control a franchise seem to be the driving forces behind this situation. I believe Baldoni's lawsuit clearly outlines her motives. In his amended complaint, Brian Friedman uses language that indicates they recognize this as a narcissistic smear campaign. A common tactic in such campaigns is to reverse the roles of victim and perpetrator, which is what Blake's attorneys are claiming. However, the truth is that she initiated this by leaking the CRD complaint, a confidential document, to the New York Times. This leak occurred in December, following months of stories from her camp to various tabloids about alleged hostility on set, discussions of inappropriate behavior, lingering kisses, and feelings of discomfort and unsafety. This narrative competes with her attempt to take control of the film and the creative differences. Baldoni's side has maintained a factual approach throughout. They didn't exchange insults as much, but Blake's narrative painted Baldoni and Wayfair as dangerous. Despite her ongoing court filings, claiming they need a high-level protective order due to the involvement of celebrities, she attempts to link random comments and messages people receive in their DMs to Wayfair, which is quite amusing. It's not funny that these individuals are receiving threats. Rather, it's amusing that they assume it's from Wayfair. Anyone with a social media presence, especially celebrities, could likely find threats in their DMs at any time. I could probably uncover 10 if I looked closely, and I'm fairly certain it's not Wayfair targeting me. It's an unfortunate aspect of this job, and no one should be sending such threats. However, she is using divisive language in her filings to portray him as dangerous, trying to escalate the narrative that he poses a threat. The idea is that if he's so dangerous, why would anyone want to collaborate with him? This is just a continuation of a smear campaign. If no one wants to work with him, if Sony and other major distribution companies refuse to partner with him, he could be pushed out of the industry. Then she could take control of the Colleen Hoover franchise. This is outlined in his complaint on page 111, where it states that empowered by her celebrity influence and strong allies, Lively did exactly that. What she set out to do was take someone else's movie for her own, undermining years of creative vision and careful planning in favor of her own brand-building campaign. But why would Lively even want to seize control over the film? Why would she insist on taking on extra work without additional pay or credit? It's a valid question. Based on what we know, Lively may have been driven by several factors. She might have wanted to take charge of the film to position herself for the production of the sequel. It starts with us. This motivation could also explain why the cast, who may have hoped or been promised roles in a future project, chose to align with the powerful couple. They might have genuinely believed they could dismantle Baldoni and Wayfair, forcing them to relinquish or even sell the rights to the sequel. Another possibility is that Lively felt compelled to match her star husband, Ryan Reynolds, who is known for taking significant control over the production of Deadpool 2, leading to director Tim Miller's departure. Witnessing the fame and success that Ryan commanded, she may have decided to adopt his approach to seize her own power and control. This is supported by many statements from Lively indicating that he is involved in every project she undertakes and vice versa. Lively and Reynolds, used to getting their way, perhaps felt entitled to do so. Regardless of her motivations, Lively's insistence on taking control of the film is undeniable, and there can be no justification for her manipulative and extortionate tactics aimed at gaining complete control over the project. There was a desire for ultimate control over the film, aiming to enhance her brand and business ventures. However, Lively's promotional strategy led to a wave of negative press. In this context, Tim Miller was pushed out after the first Deadpool and Ryan took over the franchise. Those involved in the original Deadpool have discussed this extensively. The actual creator of Deadpool was essentially sidelined at the premiere of Deadpool and Wolverine. He expressed his feelings about his treatment at the premiere, which echoed the experiences of others like Baldoni. I'll delve into that in another video. Returning to the sequel, as all this drama unfolded in real time, the movie was breaking box office records despite its modest budget. There was much speculation about the inevitable sequel. Discussions arose about the character's portrayal, with claims that Bond was dangerous and made everyone uncomfortable. We know Leslie Sloan was pushing that narrative to the Daily Mail and other outlets, while Baldoni and his team were trying to counter it, being cautious not to appear retaliatory. The document they drafted never acknowledged any wrongdoing. It simply outlined their return-to-work agreement without admitting fault. They wanted Bond and Wayfair to issue a statement taking responsibility for the negative press. There was a lot going on and Blake faced significant backlash. Bond's lawyers refused to apologize, stating it would be career-ending. Any lawyer will tell you that you should never apologize in a professional context because it can imply liability. If his team had conceded to what Ryan and Blake wanted them to publicly acknowledge, it could have jeopardized the studio's future, and no one would want to work with them again. Even though the statements didn't directly say what she was implying, they were essentially being pressured to admit liability, which could have led to litigation. No one is going to admit to something they didn't do. They tried various tactics to get them to yield, hoping to reverse the negative backlash from the marketing campaign. As discussions about the sequel began, I noticed a brief article in September on Life and Style. It claimed that Ryan Reynolds was willing to buy out Justin Baldoni from It Ends With Us. First of all, he doesn't need to buy anyone out. A buyout suggests a partnership, and Blake doesn't have a partnership with Wayfair for this film. When they acquired the film in 2019, she was unaware of it. A buyout implies a business relationship, which seems quite presumptuous. They invested money, so they should be satisfied with that. The article stated that Ryan Reynolds would do anything and spend any amount to ensure It Ends With Us continues without Blake having to work with Boni, which is quite a statement. A source exclusively tells Life and Style that there seems to be a misunderstanding about the ownership stakes involved. The way it's being presented suggests that Blake and Ryan have a percentage of the project, but in reality, Wayfair, led by CEO Justin Baldoni, holds all the rights. It's being framed like a buyout, which implies that the business is dissolving and that there are ties being severed. However, Justin doesn't have to sell. He could simply put It Starts With Us on a shelf and never release it since he owns it. Additionally, the source mentioned that this is Blake's biggest film to date, and Ryan is concerned about being replaced in a potential sequel. This implies that they recognize Blake's position is not guaranteed, and she has no claim to the sequel, despite the narrative suggesting otherwise. After doing some research, I found an article from Variety magazine from late August that clarifies the situation regarding the rights. It states that Wayfair and Baldoni hold the rights to both novels and do not just have an option, which is often the case with popular literary properties. This means he doesn't need to renew any agreements, which typically expire 18 months after a deal is signed, and he is the only one who can decide the project's future. The deal was established after the novel sold a significant number of copies but before Hoover gained massive popularity on BookTok, which is part of TikTok. And it was well before she hit the New York Times bestseller list that she became really popular in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Here's where it gets tricky. Before the film's release, Belden told Variety about the sequel that he and Wayfair haven't even started thinking that far ahead because he's trying to stay in the present as much as possible. However, industry sources suggest it's hard to believe that the creative minds at Wayfair, known for titles like the Garfield movie and the upcoming Will Ferrell documentary, haven't considered adapting a second installment of the widely popular two-part book series. This is where Sony's siding with Blake makes sense. Sony has the automatic option to distribute a potential sequel but can't force a follow-up film without Wayfair's involvement. The second novel takes place a few months after the first, so producers likely wouldn't want too much time to pass for fear of the actors aging out of their roles. Entertainment industry sources also note that ideally, no more than 2 or 3 years should pass between installments to keep the audience engaged. Did you hear that? Sony has the automatic option to distribute it, but they can't compel Wayfair to make the film. So if Justin doesn't want to work with Blake, and if he feels traumatized by this process and doesn't want to deal with that narcissistic abuse again, he doesn't have to make the film. I don't think the second part of the series is even that significant. I haven't read it, but I did read It Ends With Us, which is her biggest selling book with over 10 million copies sold. It Starts With Us has sold about 3 million, which is impressive, but it doesn't compare to It Ends With Us. The reason It Ends With Us is a bigger seller is due to its content and the generational story it tells. It Starts With Us is about building their new life, and the drama lies in it. The journey really unfolds in It Ends With Us and It Starts With Us. While it was a significant title, it isn't as widely recognized and certainly isn't the fan favorite. So yes, they could make a sequel, but there's no guarantee it would be as successful. If Sony decides to move forward with a sequel, they must contractually allow Wayfair to produce the film. Blake can't make it. They exclusively own the rights. It's not a matter of tentative ownership. She sold the rights completely in 2019, relinquishing all ownership. There's no buyout option and you can't force a buyout. You simply cannot compel Wayfair to do anything. If you can't force someone to act and you want to create the film and expand the franchise, wouldn't false accusations be a clever way to damage the studio that holds the film rights, allowing you to take control? Given the existing relationship Reynolds has with Sony and the fact that they see him as a lucrative asset, they may overlook other factors. Studios are often unethical, and it seems the narrative that Bond is dangerous is being turned on its head, suggesting that Ryan Reynolds might be the real threat. According to Belden, they were warned that if they didn't comply, the gloves would come off, which was a veiled threat that people at their agency, WME, were advised to take seriously. Many in the industry were reportedly fearful of the tactics these two might employ. Ultimately, it seems that narcissists dislike being told no. If you don't acquiesce like Tim Miller did, it appears he was worn down by Ryan Reynolds' need for control. Even though he didn't own the franchise, he essentially handed it over because he wanted to avoid further conflict. The worse their reputations become, the more their illicit activities to gain power are exposed. One thing that's really being overlooked in all of this is that Ryan is a member of the Writers Guild Association. As a member, he cannot do uncredited work. In the same article discussing the sequel, it's mentioned that Ryan's involvement in the film is a significant issue and could potentially get him in trouble with the Writers Guild. It states that Ryan's participation raises a second WGA concern. The film began production on May 5, 2023, just 3 days after the start of last summer's WGA strike. Reynolds, who received screenwriter credits for Deadpool 2, Deadpool, and Wolverine, is a WGA member and would have been prohibited from contributing to the screenplay between May 2 and September 20, 2023. Writers picketed the New Jersey site, and production was paused in late June 2023 before the SAG-AFTRA strike began in July. A source close to Reynolds mentioned that he passed on the film's rooftop scene in April 2023. However, there's another issue. Because of the strike, it could be a violation if he contributed to the screenwriting without proper credit. If the producers were unaware and didn't credit him and Ryan did contribute, he knows he can't engage in uncredited writing and still maintain good standing with the WGA. So Ryan's involvement here is quite complicated. What I see is a man who believes he doesn't have to follow the rules. This is a cutthroat individual who will do whatever it takes to succeed, regardless of who he steps on. It's evident from his past relationships. He was with Alanis Morissette, left her, and then quickly married Scarlett Johansson. Even while still married to Scarlett, he met Blake. This man is clearly social climbing. He uses women and movies to elevate his status. His wife seems to have learned from him, and he appears so insecure in his masculinity and controlling behavior that she can't be on a set without him. They push this narrative that it's sweet they never work apart, always alternating and being on set together. Blake has publicly shared that she sometimes feels she needs him around when other men are present, fearing something might happen. She has admitted to misinterpreting interactions with men and worrying about her husband's jealousy. If he's so insecure that his adult wife can't work on a movie set without him, is that really a loving husband or an abusive one? There's definitely something troubling in that dynamic. Plus, he's 12 years older than her and met her when she was quite young. I'm not saying Blake Lively is perfect or anything like that, as she claims, but we know Ryan is becoming who Blake is, and together they create a very toxic dynamic. The motive is clear. Similar to what they did to Tim Miller with Deadpool, They are attempting to pressure Boney into selling the movie rights. Boney refuses to take liability, won't apologize, and isn't willing to sell the film to them. Blake's statement of "I'll follow you anywhere" has led to this outcome, and they are following through on their threat. Boney's lawyers seem to be quite aware of the situation, and that's likely why they've shared certain details in their complaints without revealing everything. A complaint doesn't need to disclose the entire story. These documents are crafted like narratives to engage the public and generate excitement. It feels very much like a PR move, but they are providing enough information for us to understand the ongoing conflict. The issue with Blake's side is that everything they reference in their complaint can be easily found, and it often contradicts their claims. On the other hand, Ryan Reynolds appears to have a clear mission, and if he doesn't get his way, he seems willing to intimidate his opponents into submission. Is that the behavior of a good husband or a savvy business person, or does it lean more towards being a ruthless sociopath? Perhaps the sociopath here is Ryan Reynolds. Justin Baldoni doesn't come across that way to me, but considering all of this, it could stem from how these contracts are structured. There's nothing Colleen can do, and I want to conclude by stating that Colleen is not a victim. She was well compensated for this, so for her to act like a victim is quite amusing. She made a significant amount of money from that film when it was released, and shortly after she purchased a $5 million home in the Puget Sound area. This is not the behavior of someone who is a victim. She made her choices, and for her to make Blake feel like she's a victim and that she has no rights is misleading. Girl, you sold your rights, you gave them up, and you got paid. Justin is suing for civil extortion, which involves obtaining property through threats and coercion. If the threat is that they will ruin you unless you pay up or let them buy the film, that certainly sounds like extortion to me. Given how these contracts were structured, they assumed Justin would just back down, but Justin said, "Hold my espresso," because he doesn't drink and he was ready to fight. Ryan and Blake didn't realize that Justin was not someone to be trifled with. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'm thrilled to see so many new faces here, and I appreciate your support. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye guys.